Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcasts. Today we are speaking to Jane Zauzmer and Andrew Roberts, the author and illustrator of If You Go With Your Goat to Vote. As you'll hear, this is a really, really cool conversation for a number of reasons. It's a great book. Both Jan and Andrew, this is their debut. Andrew, this is Andrew's debut as a children's book illustrator, and this is Jan's debut picture book that she authored. And it's also the interview was the first time they met each other and had a conversation with each other. So it was really, really cool. Before we invite them in, I want to give a couple quick shout-outs. First, this shout-out is to V in the Philippines. V is a fan, just discovered the program not too long ago, reached out and has shared some really nice words, and it's just been wonderful having a conversation with her about the podcast and about children's books. Also want to give a shout-out to Jennifer Lynn, also known as JLW. She is the author of My Fine Feathers. And we had a friendly wager the other day. The United States and Canada. Jen is a resident of Canada. And the United States and Canada had a Junior World Hockey Championship. And Jen reached out and asked me if I wanted to put a little something on it. And I said, sure, we'll have a nice little friendly wager. The United States won. So the Reading with Your Kids podcast logo has been on her Facebook profile page. But I wanted to give her a shout out anyways. And I just wanted to celebrate the fact that we are able to have friends all over the world. And I especially want to give a great shout out to all our listeners and friends up in Canada. We have such a beautiful friendship and relationship. Our two nations have this beautiful relationship. And I just hope that the relationship we have with Canada, even though it's not perfect, it is beautiful, and that we can grow and have relationships like that with every country all over the world. Joining us right now from right outside of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and also outside of Portland and Oregon. They are the illustrator and author of a great new book called If You Go With Your Goat to Vote. Please welcome to the show the author, Jan Zauzmer, and the illustrator, Andrew Roberts. Jan, Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
It's really exciting to have you both here. Jan, why don't we start with you? Can you tell us what inspired you to write If You Go With Your Goat to Vote?
I was inspired because my 3 kids and my husband and I always went to vote together. So I have very fond memories of their helping me push the buttons and getting a sticker and wearing red, white, and blue. And that was just always a very special occasion. Many years ago.
Yeah. You know, my kids are grown, but they, you know, when they were younger, they came to every single time I went to vote, they were with me. And I thought it was a great lesson for them, a great way to understand what voting was all about, and also about how important it is to get out there and to let your voice be heard.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the story we'll be experiencing when we sit down with our young ones to read this book?
Well, there are 13 adorable animal pairs, a grown-up and a young one, and they go through the process from chewing over the ballot to the various ways that one can vote, because there's so many different ways to vote, to ultimately, spoiler alert, the human kid growing up, having the promise of growing up to vote at himself or herself. Whoever is taken to the polls to vote is much more likely, studies show, to grow up to be a voter.
Yeah. Now, I remember when the day I turned 18, the first thing I did was register to vote. It was so important to me, so very, very important to me. Andrew, I'm wondering, what kind of memories did illustrating this book stir up in your mind?
Well, I was born in England, and my family moved to the U.S. when I was just a year old. But my parents were really excited about America, and they became citizens as soon as they could, which was in 1976, which was exciting because it was the bicentennial. Mm-hmm. So I remember all this. I remember, as Jan said, all the red, white, and blue and the stars and stripes. And like you, I registered to vote as soon as I was 18, voted in every election I could and tried to get involved. And so working on this, it was exciting because as Jan explained, every spread, every 2 pages is another situation with these animals, and they're voting, or they're getting to the polls, or they're doing something, and it all mirrors my experience as well. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed doing this.
Yeah, and Jan, a neat idea to show animals getting out and having their voices be heard. What was that? What where did that idea come from, and which animals did you choose?
I have to say that I love puns, and that's where it came from. I think, if memory serves me correctly, that the first pun I thought of was a kid chewing over the ballot, because, we chew over it mentally, and the kid in this book, literally, thanks to Andrew, chews over a ballot. So, once you have one pun, if you love gimmicks like I do, you just start coming up with a whole bunch of them. I actually came up with probably enough to fill 2 books. And my wonderful editor, Karen, helped chop it down to just the right size for a picture book. But there's nothing more fun for me than combining a creative gimmick with a civic cause. When you can gift wrap a meaningful purpose with something fun like animal puns, then I think that's just irresistible.
Yeah, neat. Now, obviously, there's a goat involved. What other animals are we going to see at the voting booth?
There are a whole bunch of them, but before we move on from goat, I have to say, when I wrote this, I had no idea how big the goat fan club is out there in the world. I am learning on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram that people really love goats. And, I'm just lucky that goat rhymes with vote and that it lends itself to the kid pun for the first and last page.
Yeah.
So, I've received a plush goat from my daughter and I goat soap from a friend. And nothing is cuter than the goat and the kid that Andrew produced. That cover, people love that cover.
Yeah.
So that's what I had to say about goats. But we have a puggle, and we have a piglet, and we have a porcupine, and a peacock, and a bunny. We have all kinds of adorable animals.
That's neat.
Well, it's also interesting because a puggle is a platypus. It's a baby platypus. A pea-chick is a baby peacock. And so I learned all these new words for baby animals, which it's all in the book. So it's cute.
I am really glad that you brought up what a puggle was, because I had no idea, and I was wondering, how am I going to ask that question without sounding dumb?
I didn't know some of these names either. I started with research, and there are a number of cute baby animal names out there on the internet.
It's neat. One of the things I love, and I'm looking at the illustration, Andrew, that you created about the kid chewing over the ballot. I think that's something that's it's a cute illustration, but I think it's a really, really important lesson, especially now, because I think we're I don't know if it's a new phenomenon, but it seems as if people aren't chewing over the ballot as much as they are deciding which tribe they want to be a part of, which team they want to be a part of, and letting others tell them how they should be voting. When I go in and vote, I'm all over the place. I'll vote for an independent for this and a Republican for that and a Democrat for that and someone from some unknown party, and I'll write people in. But I sit down and I look at all the different issues, and I don't know if folks are doing that to the extent that I hope that they would.
Yeah, well, I thought, I'm not sure whose idea it was. It was probably Jan's idea, but that if you look through the book, if there's a ballot or if there's something, we have these two characters, a giraffe and a turkey, who I guess are running for president or Senate or whatever the highest office is. And they just appear here and there. And if you look closely, as you go through, you'll realize, okay, there's a giraffe running against a turkey. And I guess what I like about it is it's not red and blue. Mm-hmm. It's all the colors are all over the place, and so we're not saying anything politically. And everybody looks happy, and I'd be happy to vote for the turkey or the giraffe. They all seem cute and they all seem friendly. So that's why I think it's probably a timeless book, as Jan said earlier, that in 10 years, it'll probably still be relevant.
Oh, absolutely. And in 10 years, you may have to add some new ways of voting. I mean, this past election was an election like no other in terms of how we can vote and how we can register. And my hope is that all these new ways of voting and registering and getting out the vote will result in more people having their voice heard. One of the things that's so disappointing to me is at the end of every election finding out that, this candidate got 50% or 51% of the vote, but they only actually got about 25% of the potential votes that could have been voted because so many people sat at home. Was that part of your motivation in writing the book, Jan, to just kind of remind people how important it is to get out there and vote?
Absolutely, because the obvious message is for the kids to get excited about voting, but there really is a very strong subtext in this book, which is for the grown-ups who are reading this to the kids to be model voters. So I'm also talking to the grown-ups. But I just want to go back for a moment. I don't want to take unfair credit. Credit for the giraffe and the turkey goes to the editorial team. And I agree. This is somewhat of a rare feel-good moment in this very fraught election season that's just awash in negativity. This is the happy part. This is saying we all have this right and this privilege, and it's such a positive aspect of democracy that we need to ensure and protect and use to the fullest extent.
Yeah. And I like what you said. I'm all about kind of throwing in sneaky messages. And I can just imagine, a 5-year-old sitting on their parents' lap reading this book, and the 5-year-old turning to the parent and saying, so, when are we going down to vote together? And just putting the parent on the spot, a parent who may not have registered in time, okay, I have to do that. Let me take care of that, and let me be a good example.
Yes, and to make a family plan, however that family chooses to vote, whether it's by mail or going to the polls or whatever it is. Families talk about voting with their kids together, and then they actually make a plan and do it.
Yeah. Andrew, one of the things that we've heard over and over here on the podcast is that, authors who are published by traditional publishing companies have little or no communication with their illustrator. So this isn't the first time we've had illustrator and author team on the podcast. But what's your experience been, and what's your preference? Do you like having communication ongoing with the author as you're creating the illustrations, or would you like to just leave me alone, let me do this, and I'll get it to you when I'm done?
Well, this is the first children's book I've ever illustrated. So my illustration career up to this point has been editorial illustration, working for magazines and newspapers, working for art directors. So there's a ton of communication. So I do sketches, I get feedback, I do finished art, I get so there's all that happening all the time. So working on this, I wasn't surprised that when I did sketches, I got feedback from the editor and the publisher and also Jan, and it wasn't really a problem because it wasn't I didn't write the book, so I didn't know the tone at the beginning as we started working, and I learned the tone as we went along. So having that input was really helpful. And even things like the expressions on the faces of the animals, you kind of have to get it right because, like, are they pensive? Are they happy? Are they worried? Are they bored? Or all these things, And so having that input is really helpful because I can imagine if I had done all the artwork and just handed it over and said, "Here it is," it wouldn't feel like a collaboration, and I like that. So I think the process worked really well.
Yeah. Jen, what was your experience? Was this a first-time experience, communicating with an illustrator as the book is being created?
Well, I have to say, I am simply overwhelmed right now to learn right here on this podcast, Andrew, that this is your first children's book to illustrate. To me, you are the best illustrator on the planet. And I cannot even believe that. It's just impossible to believe that this is your first book. And it's my first book too. And another first on this podcast, Andrew and I did not talk directly to one another throughout the process. We talked through the wonderful Beth and Karen, the art and editorial directors. And so it was only afterwards that I just felt this strong need to reach out to Andrew to thank him that we started talking by email. And it's thanks to you, Jedley, that we're meeting today on Skype. And I really can't believe how wonderful it is to meet you and to see you and to talk to you for the first time.
Great, thanks.
I feel like the host of the dating game. This is awesome.
It's a great book date.
Well, this is really wonderful. One of the things, Jan, I just want to point out, my daughter's in the music business, and she's in the business end of the music business. And anytime we go to a show together, if the artist takes the time to introduce the band, that is, once the artist does that, then my daughter's like, all right, I like her. She's cool. I respect her. And we have so many authors who come on and they kind of forget that there was a team behind the creation of this book. And I want to tip my hat to you because you've been very generous, acknowledging that there's been a team behind you, an editor, an art director, an illustrator. You wanted Andrew to be here with you to share this moment. I know being on the Reading with Your Kids podcast is so special. But that I think is really important. And I think, I just want any author out there who's listening to this to remember that and to acknowledge to people that you are part of a team. You might be the quarterback, but you still have all those other people around you that makes the team a success.
Well, it's just this book is a team effort, and these illustrations just give me endless delight. Every time I turn the pages, I see something new and fun.
That must be great to hear, Andrew.
Yeah, it's always the little details, and as I'm looking through, I am always thinking, I could have added more, but obviously less is more, but it's so tempting to think, well, there could be a little fly up here, or there could be, something coming out of the grass over here. But no, just you have to keep the eyes on the important part of the illustration. So I tried to add a few little details here and there, but actually, like if you look at the platypus at the Puggle, he's eating gummy worms, which is a great detail. Why is he eating gummy worms? I don't know, but it's a great idea, and I had a lot of fun drawing that. And I wouldn't have thought of gummy worms. It's just so perfect.
I have the ability right now. We're able to see each other here. And there's so much, both Jan and Andrew have so much excitement. And Andrew, as he was talking about the gummy worms and the Puggle, there's just, the smile is on his face. And so, I know that this was such a labor of love for both the author and the illustrator. And that's really wonderful to see.
I've done a few book readings, some events virtually at preschools and elementary schools in the past couple of weeks. And I always encourage the kids to bring a rabbit tray with a plate of carrots to enjoy, because the bunny hopping to the poles eats carrots. And also gummy worms because of that page. And the idea behind gummy worms is we didn't want an animal eating another animal in the book, even if that's what happens in real life. So gummy worms, these colorful gummy worms, are perfect, and I always have a plate at my side during the book event.
That's really cool. One of the, as we're talking about the illustrations, one of the techniques of reading with our kids that my wife shared with me is a really good practice to do is for the parent to go and cover the words, take like a little sticky note, one of those Post-it notes, and put them over the words of the book. And so the first time you go through the book, you take what's called a picture walk. And you just kind of walk through the pictures and you talk about them and think about, gee, what do you think is going on here? And what's that? And what is that animal there? I have no idea what animal that is eating the gummy worms. And that builds an interest, and it's also just a way to start the conversation about the book. And I think, Andrew, that your illustrations really lend themselves to having a fun picture walk. And then when the walk is finished, you can take the Post-it notes off and then read Jan's story.
Yeah, that's an amazing idea. It would be. I would love to do that. Actually, I'm going to have to find myself a little kid, because I wonder what they would say if, there's the goat leaving, and then there's the duck, and I would be fascinated to hear what a little kid, how they would describe, because they wouldn't really understand voting, as a young child right off the bat. So it could be amazing what they would come up with as a story.
I'm curious, Jan, I'm going to ask you the same question in a minute. Andrew and Jan, you both said that this is the first time you illustrated a children's book. Jan, this is the first time you've written a children's book, or your first published children's book. Andrew, do you have the bug? Is this something that you want to get back and do again and again and again?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm a little bit, I think I'm perfect for editorial illustration, because I'll get a project from a newspaper or magazine, and I'll have to do sketches, and I'll have to do a final, and I'll have like 3 or 4 days. And that's great, because I'm a bit manic in that respect. I'll work all night, 2 a.m, and I'll get it done. Children's book, this is 24 pages, and it's stretched out over 8 months or maybe longer, and for me that it felt like it it was never going to end, so maybe it's not the right thing for me. Although as I look at each of these pages, I think, oh, this is great. I want to draw more animals. It was really fun drawing animals. So yeah, so maybe, if this election turns into something where it goes to the Supreme Court and all that, then there's another book right there. How to ratify an election, and we've got all the animals in the world to choose from. So,
well, one thing, if I can put a bug in your ear just to get you to rethink, children's books and illustrating, I know it does take a long time, and actually 8 months is on the short side from what I've heard. It can take 2 years for some children's books to be born. But your editorial cartooning or illustrations, they're great, and they make a point and they make an impact. And some of those last, some of those, are kind of archived and people look back at them. But you're going to have families snuggled up on a couch together for years and years and years looking at your illustrations and reading Jan's story. So I'll just leave that in your head. Maybe that will motivate you to pick up a pen for another children's book. Jan, what about you? Now that this is your debut book is out there, are you working on another book? Is it something that you want to do?
I have several manuscripts in my computer files that have just been waiting till we get past GOAT to see the light of day. So my answer is a wholehearted yes. However, I was really hoping that Andrew would say yes, because I cannot imagine a book that he doesn't illustrate. Now I really want to team up with Andrew on every book. So Andrew, do think about that.
Yes. The problem is I know so many illustrators, so many amazing illustrators, that when it really depends on the story, how that ties in with the style of illustration. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we will talk about it, and if I think that your story deserves a different style of illustration, I've got a whole group of people we can aim at. So.
Well, we're going to find out. We're going to keep tuned in to find out what goes on with it. I feel like this is like a Netflix series that we can kind of check out. Before we go, Andrew and Jan, both of you, I want to check to see if there are places online where people can connect with you individually to find out more about what's going on in your creative lives. So why don't we start with you, Andrew? Is there a place online where folks can go and see more of your illustrations?
Yes, I have a website. It's andrewdraws.com. Awesome. And you'll see that I'm stylistically kind of all over the place. So whether that's good or bad, it's a lot. So andrewdraws.com. Take a look.
Right, and not Andrew's Draws. So we're not talking about it, your pants.
Nope. It's an action, I guess. Andrew Draws.
Jen, what about you? Are there places where folks can connect with you?
The best place to connect with me is on Twitter at Jan Zauzmer.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the creative team behind If You Go With Your Goat to Vote. A great new book from our friends. Jan Zauzmer is the author, and Andrew Roberts is the illustrator. Andrew, Jan, thanks so much for being part of our show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Andrew Jordan Nance. He will be here to celebrate the Barefoot King. That's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, I want to thank our guests, Jan Zauzmer and Andrew Roberts. Be sure to check out If You Go With Your Goat to Vote. I also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.